Welcome to another edition of The Learning Journey. Wayne Heinzen is my name, your host once again for what is the last of season 1 for the podcast. And I thought to close out our first season, I'd talk to one of my colleagues in L&D. Deirdre Foulkes is our guest. Hey Deirdre, welcome to The Learning Journey.
Great to be here and great to be in Cairns.
I know, it feels a little strange though, like us talking on the podcast, because this is kind of our department of what we do. But I wanted to talk to you because you just touched on it, you're back in Cairns. So you've been working remotely with MAF from the Netherlands for a long time. So I want to sort of unpack that, talk a bit about culture, talk about all of those sorts of things. Let's start with the official. What's your job title and what does that actually mean?
So I'm officially Learning and Development Trainer and Co-Ordinator. So the coordinator bit came first. I was brought on to help set up and roll out the new learning management system, Elevate, that most of you will have been on at some stage. But as that's got more stable and less hiccups, I'm back to do a little bit more face-to-face of actual training, which is my real passion.
Yeah. And obviously, with COVID in there, face-to-face training became a challenge. So it's great, we can get back to that point. Let's talk about your entry into MAF. Some guests that we've had on the podcast have been part of the organisation for 20 or 30 years, but you're not one of those people.
No, I'm a newbie.
Yeah. So tell us what you knew about MAF before you joined and what you've learned about MAF since you've come on as part of the team.
I guess for both my husband and I, we've been in and out of missions. And my husband was a MISH kid. And so MAF has been part of the picture of our background of knowing a lot about mission. So my husband actually flew in a MAF plane down when they had the training based down in Victoria. More recently, our son Isaac joined MAF. I kind of recruited him because I saw the notice on the board at the lakes and told him about it. And he came and worked for the IT department. And then he recruited me saying, looking for an L&D specialist. And that's my training and what I've done for many years. So I put my hand up and said, well, I don't know how it's going to work because at that stage I was living in the Netherlands. But Hilda had me working for her distance, and at least we were on the same time zone and popping across to Ashford every so often.
Is that the first time you've done like the remote working for an extended period?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm a face-to-face trainer.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us like that kind of learning journey, if you will, for working remotely, because I've been doing that for a little while as well. And it's a very different way of working and it requires a lot of different skills to be acquired to be able to work that way.
Yeah, I guess I've seen quite a few of our family members work remotely. So I had that as an achievable context that could work. Because we are an international organisation, there's always going to be the need for teams and working and rolling out Elevate into every program. It would be wonderful to have budget to visit every program, but it's not realistic. So it becomes for me dialing into different programs from my attic loft office in the Netherlands and really connecting with people and seeing that as a face-to-face meeting in a sense and trying to build relationship, trying to connect with people. For me, a big learning curve on the technology.
I think the last couple of years has been a big learning curve for all of us in many ways, including technology. I wonder if you could maybe speak to someone who has recently started with MAF and they're doing the remote work, so they're trying to find their place in the organisation, find their place in their team. They're trying to, get familiar with what the organisation does and all those kind of things that starts, when you come on board. Are there one or two tips maybe that you have for somebody who's in that position, given that you've been through that?
Yeah, I'd say use the capability of Teams for picking up the phone and having a conversation, having the video call, even a chat, rather than just relying on email, because a lot of people's email boxes are just cluttered. And find the channel that works for the person that you're contacting.
So culturally, you've been in the Netherlands for a number of years. What have you learned about Deirdre from your time in the Netherlands?
That I'm more resilient than I realised. I think not just wasn't a cross-cultural move, but it was a COVID cross-cultural move. And I think that complicates things. I had a year really focused on language learning, going to classes, going to conversation groups, and then COVID hit and I couldn't go to have those connections with people. Yeah, sure, there was some online learning that you could watch, but language learning is so much embedded in building relationships and being cut off from that was a challenge. And so, being stuck at home in a country that is, you don't have the support networks, you don't have the close relationships, you can't just bump into somebody at the shops and say hi and practice some language, was quite a challenge. Yeah.
So how did you push through and hopefully overcome those challenges?
I think just being aware that it was going to be a difficult time and consciously thinking, don't get into negative thinking. Listen to things that are edifying. Listen to podcasts, for example, listen to scripture, connect with people, and actually pull back from the language learning because I found when I was really, really working hard at language learning, I would start dreaming and it would become part of that. And that got me in a bit of a negative space. I'm quite hard on myself and I'm like, I'm not doing well enough with my language. And that was part of negative thinking. And I thought, actually, at this period of time, I can't do this to myself. I have to feed myself.
So someone goes to a new country, they go to a new organisation, say they join MAF, kids go into a new school, whatever it might be. There's a bunch of new things. There's excitement wrapped up in that. But there's also a lot of challenges and sometimes there's some hesitation because it's new.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how to best navigate that journey?
I think relationships are key. So plugging into where, you can find fellowship in a church, but also clubs and groups. And I think if you have got kids, that can be a really good bridge with the schools, with the clubs. If you haven't, you've got to be a bit more intentional, I think. And for me, it was going to the language conversation classes, which were run by Dutch volunteers, an amazing group of women mostly, and making connections with the other expats, but with those local people. And with my neighbour, I had a wonderful neighbour who wasn't a Christian, but she was a real networker. And she kind of introduced me into the community in an amazing way.
Yeah. So I wonder if we can take a couple of steps back. Generally speaking, just talk about culture shock. Because when you move to a new place, there's culture shock.
Yeah.
Some handle that better than others. When you return to a place like you've done, to Cairns, there's reverse culture shock. So talk to us and maybe even just unpack a little bit. What is culture shock and how do we deal with it?
Yeah. So for me, it's that insecurity that comes at not knowing normal. Like my normal, where I'm comfortable and I'm relaxed and I know what the expectations are. Suddenly I can't just relax in life. I have to be alert and aware and have my antennae out all the time to see what's the normal here. And sometimes you get to a point of normality and then something happens like a death in another culture. And you don't know, how do they do death? Should I go and visit people? Should I take food? Do you send flowers? Do you embrace everyone and go and see them, or do you pull back? And all those things, suddenly you've got to navigate as well.
And really, those things take time to learn. And some people can live in a country for years and years and years. And you feel like, and this has been my experience, you feel like you understand the culture, but then something happens which is not normal. It's out of the ordinary. And you go, I don't understand that part of the culture. So it's a continual learning thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And you're a child, you're a baby, you're always putting your foot in it. And it's very humbling, I think.
Yeah.
And it's having that attitude of being willing to stumble and to offend. All the things that you don't want to do. You want to serve this culture, you want to blend in this culture, and you just are a learner in that culture.
So speaking of learning, we're both in the learning and development department. And one of the things that we aiming for when it comes to MAF is to have this culture of continuous learning so that everybody across the organisation, whether they're in a support office, whether they're in a program, whether they're at a management level or whether they're a store person, everyone across the organisation is learning. They're continuing to grow. Can you speak into continuous learning for us?
We would love people to use Elevate, but that is only just one very, very small piece of what learning is. And it's learning culture, it's learning our job, it's learning how to be a parent at a different stage of our parenting journey. There's a whole lot of learning that is in life, and we at Learning and Development never want to get stuck with e-learning is learning. You know, we want to support you. We want to bring resources to you. If you've got a need and a gap that you've identified, we want to help support you in getting training alongside somebody else or in job shadowing. There's so many different ways that all of us learn, and we don't want to ever limit what learning is.
It's really about reframing, isn't it, what learning is? Because some people, when we speak of learning, they're like, oh, it just means I'm going to be in a class or I'm going to be on Elevate. But learning is across the board. What course can I do? Yeah. So Deirdre, one of the things I hear from time to time in the organisation, there are many people across MAF that have a schedule that is beyond full. And so when we speak about learning, they're like, oh, I don't even have time to do everything I need to do. Where am I going to find time to do any learning?
Yeah.
How do we help someone like that? What can we do as L&D, but also what can they do? Because I don't think it's either or. I think it has to be both.
Yeah. I think there's that prioritization that comes where all of us are really busy and a crisis occurs. Somehow we find time to deal with that thing because it's become a priority. And if we can, schedule something, half an hour a week to listen to a learning podcast or write down media or read a good practice article or talk to your manager about some upskilling in math courses that you can do, and just think, where is my downtime during the day? I was talking to someone and they said, actually, after the planes go out in the day, while we're waiting for them to come down, there's a low pitch. There's a time that I'm not usually required. And that might be a half-hour learning block for you if you can identify what that is. For those of you who travel to work, we've got so many resources now that we can access on our phones, and we can be listening to a TED Talk, that just expands our worldview and how we think about things.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities. Yeah.
Of course, that's after you've listened to the current episode of The Learning Journey.
Oh, of course.
I think there's also something to be said when it comes to learning for consistency. So like an ad hoc approach of going, oh, well, I've got half an hour here, so I'll grab that is good. But I think what you need to do, and I think you touched on it there, is you need to make sure that there is some consistency. So every week you're saying, okay, I'm going to spend half an hour on learning.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to spend 10 minutes on learning. Speak to that, the value of consistency when it comes to learning.
Yeah, I think so. It's really easy for a one-off to get crowded out. All of us knows what happens to our exercise when we don't prioritize it, when we just say, oh, sometime this week I might go for a run, is we're never going to get there. So yeah, having the consistency, having the plan to improve. I just want to do a big shout out to the Math Technologies team, who set aside a half day of the team's time every week to learn as a team, or for individuals to have that learning time. And I think there's something amazing in teams who really set aside learning time.
So speaking of time, from your experience, is it the more time you can spend on learning, the better? Or is there the limit where you can only absorb so much? I'm thinking of cognitive load, where you can only absorb so much and then you're not actually going to learn anymore.
Yeah.
What's the sweet spot? Like, where's the balance when someone's coming to plan a week and go, well, I want to put some time in for learning?
Yeah, I would think you'd want it half an hour to an hour. Perhaps, you think Friday afternoon's a low time for my workload, but this could be something that I learn.
Sure.
And again, it's not going to be necessarily formal learning. It could be that you set aside the time to go and shadow somebody else's job, and then something about a colleague's practical tasks that are different from what you do on a normal basis, but you could help out, or you might be extending yourself so that becomes a potential job for you in the future.
Yeah.
So if you're a hands-on person, it could be practical learning that you're scheduling. It doesn't have to be a sit down, listen to a course. It can be expanding your skills and your talents in a really practical way.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could encourage someone who's in a management or a leadership position and, they're leading a team. Can you share some encouragement for them because they're juggling a lot of things and a lot of demands on their time. How can we encourage them to invest in their team when it comes to learning?
I think as managers, if we can really see growth and development of our staff, it is an investment and it does cost us to share, to teach, to train, to enable. But the payoff, seeing the short-term pain, long-term gain, if you can upskill your staff, if you can set aside time for them from a normal task to learn something new, if you can sit with them and identify what it is that they need and you want to see from them and have a mutual agreement on what that learning is going to be, and then support that staff member to achieve that, long term it's going to really pay off. You're going to have support in the end, more support, more maturity, more skilled staff to take some of your load. It's always hard doing the process, but it's well worth.
And I think that's so very important, that change of mindset we spoke about earlier, that it's not a cost, it's actually an investment.
It is, yeah.
And if you just see, one of my team is going to spend 30 minutes today doing some learning, that means the cost is they're not getting something else done. I think if you change that mindset to go, well, no, I'm investing in that person and the return will come. There's always a return on investment. And it might take longer to see the results of that, but that actually comes.
And if you target the learning too, I think that's the key thing, having those conversations about skills gap, about vision for the future and where a staff member wants to go to so that they're motivated to improve themselves in the direction that they want to go, that of course fits with our organisational priorities, and has targeted learning. So it's not just, I pulled any old course off Elevate because it looked good, but you've identified a need and you've spent some time to work out what's the best way and talk to us about it. Please, we want to be a support to you to find the resources you need and then plug your staff member into that and release them time-wise to be able to pursue that learning.
Yeah, no, I do like that. learning.development@mafint.org if you do need to get in contact with us. Deirdre, you've been involved in training and learning for many, many years. You come with a wealth of experience. I want to give you the opportunity, either 3 or 5 top learning tips that from your experience that you've learned from somebody else that you've read about, just as kind of we round out today's episode and this first season of the learning journey. I want to leave people with some tips that are achievable for them to think about, to implement, something along those lines.
I think having a learning, we were talking earlier about growth mindset, having an attitude of not being content with the status quo, but wanting to improve, wanting to learn, wanting to grow. I am a great fan of a Mark Twain quote, which is, don't let schooling interfere with your education. And there's that sense of education is so much wider than the structures and the institutions and the courses. And just keeping an open mind so that every day I learn something, don't let learning be a chore. Let it be a wonder and privilege and something that we give ourselves a treat of learning, not I have to learn. So it's having that sense of wanting it.
Yeah, I like that learning be a wonder. Hey, thank you so much for being a guest on the learning journey today. I want to finish with a cheeky question if I can. I want to know what you've learned about being a guest on the podcast.
Oh, that it was a lot more relaxed than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, that's good. If that's how you feel, then I've done my job. But Deirdre, thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you on the Learning Journey podcast today. And as we say here on the Learning Journey, the sky's the limit.
Great. Bye.
Thanks again to my colleague in L&D, Development Foulkes, for joining us on the podcast today. Deirdre shared some great ideas for how you can continue to invest into your growth and development, and how simple that can really be if you take deliberate steps towards having a learning mindset. One step you can take today if you want to learn something new is simply to go to our online learning platform Elevate, because there's hundreds of courses available in the content library and they will help you to reach your full potential. Well, this episode officially wraps up season 1 of the Learning Journey, so I want to say a very big thank you for your support of the podcast. Season 2 isn't too far away, but until then, next time what we're going to do is press rewind and take a look at some of our favourite moments from this season, so we do hope you can join us then.